She walked into the living room, looked at me and my 3 best friends, and asked us all if we wanted to sleep with her. And I realized this wasn't a breakdown. This wasn't a cry for help. She knew exactly what she was doing.
Psychologists call it the moment of clarity that destroys you. Not because you lost someone, but because you realize you never really knew them at all.
We were just watching TV, me and my 3 closest friends. Normal night. Pizza on the table, game on in the background. She was in the other room for a while, and I didn't think anything of it. That was just us. Comfortable. Settled. I thought we were happy. And then she walked in. She stood in the doorway, and I remember thinking she looked too calm, too composed for whatever she was about to say. And then she said it, clear as day. She asked all of us, me included, if we wanted to be with her, together, at the same time. The room went silent. My friends looked at me, and I think in that half second, I felt something I can't fully explain even now. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was recognition. Like something clicked into place that I had been refusing to see for a very long time. I looked back at my friends, and I said, "Go ahead," because I already knew. It was over. I don't know how I knew so completely in that one moment, but I did. Whatever she and I had, or whatever I thought we had, died right there in that living room before anything even happened. I walked out, went to another room, sat with it. They called me in when it was done. I refused. I couldn't even look at her the same way. I asked her to leave the next morning. No screaming, no long conversation. Just, get your things. You need to go. And that's when I started finding out the rest of it.
What just happened in that living room wasn't impulsive, and that's the first thing you need to understand. When someone makes a request that bold, that brazen, in front of people they know personally, in a shared home, with a long-term partner present, that is not a spontaneous decision. That is the surface expression of a pattern that has likely been running underground for a long time. Psychologists who study compulsive sexual behavior and intimacy avoidance often describe what's called relational self-sabotage, an unconscious or sometimes very conscious drive to destroy a relationship that has become too emotionally close, too stable, or too real. Some people don't know how to exist inside genuine intimacy, so they burn it down. But here's what's more clinically interesting. She didn't do this privately. She didn't confess an affair or quietly leave. She performed it, in front of witnesses, in front of his people. That choice, to make it public, to make it undeniable, suggests something deeper than self-sabotage. It suggests she wanted him to see it. She wanted him to know. The question is, why?
After she was gone, I started having conversations I should have had a long time ago. With friends, with people who knew us both. And what came back to me, piece by piece, was something I wasn't fully prepared for, even after everything I'd already witnessed. She had been sleeping with nearly every guy I knew. Not strangers, not people from some other part of her life. People from mine. Friends, acquaintances, people who had sat at my table and eaten my food and looked me in the eye. I don't know the exact number. I stopped trying to count. What I kept coming back to wasn't even the betrayal in the traditional sense. It was the architecture of it. How long it must have taken. How many conversations happened behind my back. How many times someone looked at me and said nothing. How many times she looked at me and said nothing. You start to question your own perception of reality. You go back through memories and you look at them differently. That trip we took, that dinner, that argument that seemed to come out of nowhere. You start wondering, what was real? What was I actually living inside of? And then, months later, she called. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. She wanted to meet for lunch, said she needed to talk to me about something important, something she'd been thinking about for a while. I agreed to meet her. I don't fully know why. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I was just curious what she could possibly have left to say. I should not have been prepared for what came next.
Let's pause here, because what's been described so far fits a very recognizable psychological profile, and it's important that we name it clearly. The pattern of sleeping with multiple people within someone's social circle is not random. It's territorial in reverse. Instead of protecting a relationship, it dismantles it from the inside, quietly, systematically, and often with a level of emotional detachment that can look, from the outside, like confidence. This is sometimes associated with what researchers call dark triad traits, particularly narcissism and psychopathy, not as a casual label, but as a behavioral description. The need for stimulation, the absence of empathy, the ability to compartmentalize deeply enough to maintain a normal-seeming relationship on the surface while living an entirely different reality beneath it. But what's striking here, what elevates this beyond a typical betrayal story, is the social dimension. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was embedded in his world while doing it. That requires a specific kind of psychological wiring, the ability to read people, to manage multiple narratives simultaneously, and to feel no significant conflict while doing so. And now, she's called him. She wants a meeting. When a person who has behaved this way reaches back out, especially after this kind of ending, it is almost never about remorse. It is almost always about need. Something has shifted in their world, and they have decided, with calculation, that you are the solution. Pay attention to what comes next.
We met at a restaurant. She was already seated when I got there. She looked composed, put together, like this was a business meeting. No apology when I sat down. No acknowledgement of everything that had happened. She just looked at me and said she had a proposition. She told me she wanted me to get her pregnant. Not sarcastically, not as some kind of strange joke. She was completely serious. She laid it out like she'd rehearsed it. She said she'd chosen me because of how I look, my sense of humor, my intelligence. She said she'd researched me or thought about me, like I was a candidate, like this was a selection process and I'd made the short list. She said she didn't want me involved in the child's life. She wanted to go back to her family's farm, have the baby, raise it with her mother. She just needed the biological piece from me, specifically. And she said all of this without blinking. I sat there for a moment, and I want to be honest, there was a part of me that found it almost darkly funny, because what she didn't know, what I had never told her, what almost no one knows, is that I'm sterile. It's not something I advertise. It's just a fact of my life that I've made peace with. But she didn't know, and I thought about it for exactly 1 second. The idea of saying yes, watching this entire plan she'd constructed so carefully crumble on its own. No confrontation, no explanation, just nature doing what nature does. But I didn't. I stood up, told her to lose my number, and I walked out before we'd even ordered. I don't think she ever understood what she was actually asking. Not really. She'd looked at me and seen a resource, a genetic transaction, not a person she'd once shared a life with, not someone she'd hurt, just a function she needed filled. That was the last time I saw her.
There's a concept in psychology called objectification, and we typically talk about it in one direction. But what this story illustrates is that objectification runs both ways. And when it comes from someone who once claimed to love you, it lands differently than most betrayals. She never saw him as a partner. The evidence in retrospect is everywhere.
the systematic behavior within his social circle, the public nature of the final act, and then, most revealingly, the lunch. The way she returned not with guilt, but with a transaction, a request, a use case. This is what psychologists call instrumental relating, engaging with other people not as full human beings with inner lives and worth, but as means to an end, instruments, tools. It's one of the most quietly devastating things one person can do to another, because it often operates beneath the surface of what looks like a normal relationship. And here's what's most clinically significant. He didn't rage. He didn't expose her. He didn't weaponize the information he had. At every turn, the living room, the next morning, the restaurant, he made clean exits. That's not weakness. That's what emotional regulation looks like under enormous pressure. That's someone who had already grieved the relationship before it officially ended and chose dignity over destruction. The sterility detail, the quiet irony of it is almost poetic. He had the perfect weapon and chose not to use it, not because she deserved protection, but because he didn't need the satisfaction. That's the difference between someone who has done their psychological work and someone who hasn't. The most important thing he did in this story wasn't confronting her. It wasn't exposing her. It wasn't even leaving. It was knowing, in that single moment in the living room, that he already had his answer, and trusting it. Some people don't leave your life because they stop caring about you. They leave because they were never really there, and you finally stopped pretending otherwise.